we should be live now. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in this world. To all of our participants watching, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Risa Hanselman, and I am part of the Earth Action Hub Organizing Committee, and I will be helping facilitate this session. It will be recorded and will be available on the platform afterwards. For now, if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat below this video on the platform, and we'll have a chance towards the end to ask our speakers here today some questions. So it is my pleasure to introduce Flávia, Pascale, and Deepaloke here with us to talk a bit about climate change and the law. So I guess I will hand it over to Pascale Bird from Legal Response International. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Risa, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to anyone joining us, and welcome. And so today we're going to talk about what the role of the law in the climate change context. When people talk about climate change, they usually think about the science, or they may think about the environment. They will think about deforestation, perhaps, and melting glaciers, etc. And the law might probably not be the first thing that springs to mind. Yet, a law has a really important role to play, and so that's what we want to talk about today, and try to get across to. Help me do this today. I'm very pleased to have Flávia and Deepaloke, who are both lawyers. Flávia is a Brazilian lawyer who has worked in NGOs and in an organization called, is a co-founder of an organization called La Clima, and a youth climate leader, and she's been involved as well in the World Economic Forum. And Deepaloke is a lawyer, a commercial lawyer working in private practice. He's qualified in England and Wales and also in India. And both of them are lawyers with very different experience of the law. Flávia, perhaps I'll start off with you. Do you want to tell our audience a little bit about your background and your experience, and how you, in your professional life, have used the law to address the climate change crisis?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really, really happy to be here with you all today. So just bringing a little bit of my background and how law has been helping me to develop my role as a professional. I graduated here in Brazil, and I did my master's in the UK on international development and sustainability politics. And my thesis was focused on climate justice. And since then, I've been working to bring the climate justice into the ground. So when I came back to Brazil, I co-founded both organizations that Pascale said. And one of the reasons is regarding to climate justice is a way of bringing climate justice into the ground. But thinking about the organizations that have been working the past 2.5 years, knowing about the law, knowing the structures of the law in my country, how that works, how can we develop some policies or help me to bring to those topics into the governance level. An example that I have to bring is there is a city here in Brazil, in the northeast of Brazil, called Recife, and it's the first city to apply for a climate emergency decree. So, and I was behind the scenes with a team with that organization, helping that city to have a decree on climate emergency. It's something new. It's something that, because we know how law works behind the scenes and how we can apply that topics on the governance level, and even like with the technical team and the political team, we were able to have the first Brazilian city with a climate emergency decree. So it's one of the examples that I can bring, and how being a lawyer and how studying law has helped me to achieve those concrete examples about having the law translated into climate change and also translated into the local ground in cities and municipalities.
Thank you, Flávia. And perhaps we'll come back later to talk a little bit about the different levels of the law. And you've talked about cities, and as we will see possibly later, law, of course, is applied at domestic level, and government, parliament, etc., have a big role to play. But there's also an international level, and you both know, I know a little bit about that, so perhaps we'll talk about it if we have time. But Deepaloke, do you want to tell us about your experience working in a big commercial law firm in London?
Sure. Thank you so much, Pascale, again for the invite, and it's lovely to be speaking here this evening. In terms of the ways in which lawyers in a commercial law firm interact with law and climate change, I could think of three. The first and foremost one is, of course, through our work with organizations such as Legal Response International, where lawyers volunteer their time and help Legal Response International and other similar organizations responding to queries from much smaller states, from other organizations working in the area of climate change itself. The second area, of course, is where the firm works with regular clients whose climate priorities have evolved rapidly over the last 6 months to a year, where now there is much more talk of financial regulation in the context of climate change, corporate disclosure of climate risks, and even a growth in requests for advice relating to environmental, social, and governance related issues in investment strategies. The third area is, of course, for Clifford Chance as a significant international law firm, it has its own commitment to corporate sustainability. So we continue to evaluate how, as a signatory to the UN Global Compact, we could be doing things better within our organization and the commitment that we could therefore make towards climate change. So these are the three broad ways in which we sort of a commercial lawyer comes across climate change on a day-to-day basis.
I realized that you've talked about as your first point the way that you and others in your law firm have got involved working with our organization LRI, and suddenly I realized that actually I don't think that I explained what we do. So very briefly, Legal Response International intervenes at the UN climate change negotiation, and we work with delegation of low-income, poor and vulnerable developing countries who participate in those delegations. And there's a really big imbalance in those negotiations insofar as those delegations often don't have lawyers on their team, or very few lawyers on their team. So they are at a disadvantage to negotiate effectively as against the big delegation. And so we try and redress that imbalance by giving them access to lawyers such as Deepaloke and others in his law firm, so pro bono lawyers who give legal assistance and legal support to the delegations during those conferences. So that's very briefly what we do, and I think later in the chat we'll explain that, we'll give a link to the organization, and if you have any question you can be in touch later. So you've talked a little bit, you've briefly, Flávia talked about the work that you have been doing, governance level and city level, and you, Deepaloke, in a commercial environment. What other ways are there in which the law and what type of law can be used? Can you think of any other ways, perhaps that you have not come across directly, but that you know of?
So I can, there's plenty of different types of laws and ways we can play the role. We've thinking about how law works. As Pascale said, there is like an international level, national level, and even within countries that depends a little bit. The law in Brazil is a little bit different from the law in England, for example. So it's important to understand like there's different ways of looking at that. But when we are talking about climate change, I think the beauty of that, it's we are able to connect in an international level as well. But also we still have climate litigation, and it is spreading around the world. I think nowadays we have around thousands, maybe less, around 1,200 like climate litigation process around the world. It's not that many, but still it's growing, and mainly the movements from civil society, like they are the ones who are being brave enough to stood up and develop and face those climate litigations against governments or companies, also regulations, government decree, as I said an example before, or piece of legislations that are adopted by parliament as well. So that's why it's so important, so we can have the law behind it, how we behave in society, even mainly think about climate change, that we need to think about mitigation, we need to think about adaptation of climate change. And if it's the law is not connected with that, we might have some problems in the future thinking as a society, you know, to try to achieve a carbon neutral market maybe, or society, depends on where we are looking at.
Yeah.
I think from my end, Pascal, there are now newer areas of law that are developing, and as someone who practices in the area of regulatory law, what we now see is invariably regulators and government agencies around the world thinking more broadly in terms of climate risks and climate change. So, for example, in the context of antitrust law, which is the area I specialize in, there are now a lot of discussions around how antitrust law could change or could assist companies in meeting their sustainability objectives, or how it could accommodate climate change related concerns. And in this way, even established areas of the law are thinking in terms of how it can accommodate the concerns that have arisen around climate change in the world today. And I mean, I also think that the COVID-19 pandemic has really put the issue front and center for regulators and government agencies around the world, where there was always awareness around climate change as being a burning issue. But I think the reduction in emissions in all countries and globally as a result has meant that this has started finally getting the sort of attention it deserves from governments and agencies.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're right, and I think some of you might be familiar with the Paris Agreement. You might have certainly heard of it. And so the Paris Agreement, which was adopted 6 years ago, put some important commitments on governments to reduce their emissions and also take on the different commitments. And these were taken at international level, but governments are now working at domestic level and at sub-national level, local level, etc., to comply with the commitments that they had taken, as Flávia said, in terms of mitigation measures, in terms of adaptation measures, and others. And so a lot of the work that is being done involves indeed developing new laws and new regulations, or in some cases adapting or reviewing existing laws and regulations to make them compliant with those commitments taken under the Paris Agreement. And so this is one you perhaps will have heard as well of COP26, which is due to take place in Glasgow later this year. And so this will be one important event and conferences in which all countries will be joining and negotiating further and pledging more ambitious targets to try and limit the global warming and the temperature rise, etc. But Flávia, you talked earlier about climate change litigation and how this is a very growing area, and indeed, and you talked about the fact that litigation can be taken against states, or it can be taken against corporation. I think there has been a case recently, very recently in Brazil, that involves young people, because quite a number of youth cases have involved young people. Some of you might have also heard about Greta, the complaint filed by Greta Thunberg and 15 other children. But do you want, Flávia, perhaps to say a few words about this case in Brazil?
Yeah, sure. So it recently happened like end of last year. But like 6 young people from different organizations, from movements here in Brazil, they got together because at the end of last year, as Pascale was saying, we have like the Paris Agreement helps countries to develop their NDCs. So, and within 5 years, they have to review that NDCs and they have to be ambitious, looking at the future of carbon zero country society. And when we had our NDC reviewed, we saw that our government wasn't ambitious enough, and they changed some aspects on our NDCs as well. So focus on that specific point. A group of young people, they open like a litigation process against the government in order to ask them to look better to our NDCs so they can be more ambitious and they can be more related to the things we really need here. We don't know how it's gonna to end. It's new here in Brazil as well. We don't know how the mainly results of that, but I think just as a first step, it's already a massive like movement that we can create here, because we can spread the knowledge about what's going on. People start discussing more about that. So it's a way just to shake society, you know, and to tell everyone as civil society, this is happening. It's our problem and we need everyone together. So we are going to be able to build up a better country regarding climate change issues. So I think even not knowing the results of that, I'm pretty sure, and I'm really proud as a Brazilian, you know, with looking at those young people and what they're doing, because we need that. So that's the reason why they did it. And let's see how it's gonna end. I hope we can win something, but if not, at least we raise awareness about the topic.
Yeah, no, you're right, very right to make that point that climate change litigation has not by any means been successful in the past, but at least it has helped raise awareness and also put pressure on governments, on big corporations, etc. So sometimes litigation is being brought, or in some cases, the people bring in what's called strategic litigation, which basically means that this is not brought specifically or only specifically for the benefit of the defendant, for the benefit of those, of the claimants who have been harmed by practice or inaction, but it's really for the benefit of society as a whole. And there are a number of cases, and strategic litigation can take place in different contexts, so not just in the climate change context, but it is one area. Climate change is one area where it is indeed becoming quite relevant. I don't know whether we have any question already, or
I have a question actually. I think law, especially around climate change, can be very confusing and perhaps intimidating, especially for young people. So in your experience, do you have any ideas about how legal talk, legal jargon, and laws can be made more accessible for young people to understand and get engaged with?
I don't know if can, yeah. So I think that the first thing that I want to bring here is it's we don't have to be scared. Young people, they don't have to be scared of not knowing what's going on or some like technical words. If you are able to study and we're able to connect with people in order to learn, I think is the best environment that we can have. And thinking about that, like LRI together with Earth Action Hub, like they're offering a legal toolkit about, but specifically talking about climate change law focus on young people. So I invited you all to go on Earth Action Hub website, and there we are going to be able to download the toolkit. It's not that like a big one, it's around 10, 12, 14 pages. So we can have like a screen, you know, to understand what it's UNFCCC, as Pascale was saying before, on international legal scenario or national one, human rights or some specific emerging issues, what is like the challenge we're going to face if you're looking at climate change and law in the future. There's a lot of things there, and it's in a way it's summarized, so we can have like an overview of what is climate change law. And also, if you are more curious, you have more curiosity about that, I think there's even the toolkit at the end, we can have some like links and websites that we can learn a little bit more about. And it's just like the first step, you know, I think it's a really, really interesting material as a first step to understand a little bit more, but there's the whole world to look around. So start from there and connect with people, share that knowledge with your friends, with your families. And if you get more and more and more interested about that, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of movements, even Earth Action Hub, LRI on the website. They have some keyword sessions with a lot of interesting questions with interesting answers as well. So there's so many places you can go, but the toolkit's a good way to start.
Good. Deepaloke, do you have any ideas and suggestions for Riza, where to find information, I suppose, about law and how to make it more accessible for non-lawyers?
Yes, I was going to say, in addition to the LRI toolkit, I mean, Google is now a really great resource on climate change. You know, I mean, if you come across terms that you are not familiar with and you just look it up, you'll come across a huge mine of information. I also think that in the context of the number of litigations going on around the world in relation to climate change, for anyone who's interested, there are a number of law firms that keep releasing summaries of the cases, what stage the cases are at, and how the cases are similar or different. And those, you know, just reading those briefings, those summaries often give people an idea about how, you know, climate change is affecting different parts of the world differently at the moment. So, for example, a small or low-lying island development states' concerns around climate change would be very different from the concerns that would be faced by a much larger country or a developed country, for example, which does not necessarily have the same concerns that as islands that potentially foresee themselves being submerged 20, 25 years from now due to climate change. So these are the different ways in which, you know, people can think about it, consider what the rest of the world is thinking about to inform their understanding of climate change and the law.
Mm-hmm. There is indeed a lot of information out there. The one thing I would say, which is of course valid for for information on climate change and the law, but more generally as well, is, you know, check your source, that your source is a serious one. And perhaps another point to make is that because the legal jargon is so complex and is so technical, etc., in some cases, depends what you need it for. If you just want to inform yourself, clearly you can, read and try and find more. But if you are thinking about, for example, bringing a case or a petition or taking action in one way, in some cases, perhaps the best recourse is to speak to a lawyer who knows about it and can explain, because as I said, terminology is very complex and of course the meaning is very precise, and one word in a sentence can easily change the whole meaning of the sentence. So. But I think we are. I don't know whether we've got any other questions. No question so far. Perhaps I think we are nearly at the end. I don't know, Flávia or Deepaloke, if you had you wanted to highlight any other tools or any other ways in which young people who want to get involved, who want to find out more about the law can do that at home from where they are, or...
Yes, sure. And also, I think I'm going to bring an example that is happening here in Brazil, and it's a recent one. It started like 2 weeks ago. One of the things that I think it helps young people to get together and to get involved on climate change agenda, and mostly regarding law, is to understand the movement that's happening in your city. There's a lot going on. Like civil society, there's like movements from youth or even lawyers, but I'm pretty sure if you look around in your city, you are going to find out some groups that are already talking about climate change, or some working group studies, or some even bigger movements in your city or close to your city. I think being together with people who are already involved in the subject is something that it's helpful. And one example here in Brazil, there's like a movement now to bring the climate security aspect on the federal constitutions of my country. So we already developed there's a bill, like a law project, a bill that it's already in the Senate. They are voting that bill. And if we have like more than 171 votes from there, we are going to be able to have in our federal constitutions in 3 specific articles, in the environmental one, the economics one, and one about dignity of human rights. And we are going to add climate security in our federal constitution. It's symbolic, like it doesn't mean that the world's going to change because of that, but at least we are going to have that tool saying that our federal constitutions, it's looking at climate security, and it's going to help us even to develop other policies as well. So that movement, it's pure law, because we have to understand how the bureaucracy works to get there, how to mobilize civil society. And now we are in the stage of literally mobilizing civil society, mobilizing young people in order to the civil society, ask them to vote. So we are in that movement now, creating that wave, and hopefully soon, I'm gonna come back here and tell you that in our federal constitution in Brazil, we have climate security as a new topic added in that. So I think it's a nice example, and it's a recent one to bring to the table.
Yeah, no, great. That is a great and a really message there, that look at what can be done in your city. You don't have to think, go very far, but just Deepaloke, last word from you. Have you?
Thank you, Pascale. I was just going to say to everyone out there, don't underestimate the difference you can make. It's very important for young people around the world to get involved. And as thanks to Flávia for the wonderful example, getting involved at the grassroots level means that the changes you make, you can feel immediately around you. And it is important for all of us to recognize that we can contribute to that change. So do get involved in whatever way you can.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's not every day that you get to hear from lawyers working on climate change, and it's very kind of encouraging and uplifting. So we are actually running out of time. but I would like to thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to speak with us. I'd also like to thank Peace Brigades in the UK and Susie Baskin for making this happen. And with that, the Legal Climate Change Toolkit that Flávia mentioned will be available on the Earth Action Hub Knowledge Hub in the next few days. So anyone who wants to can access that. And we have a few more exciting sessions coming up today as well. So we'd like to invite you all to join us for those.